Welcome to Food for Thought. My name is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. I'm your host. You can learn more about who I am and what I do by visiting my website, joyfulvegan.com. Today's topic is good news for animals and nature from 2024. Today's episode is brought to you by the listeners of this podcast. That means you, and some of you have been listening for 18 years. I am going into my 19th year of writing and producing and hosting this podcast. Yes, 19 years. No, not many podcasts can say that. If you get anything out of this podcast, this is my end of year plea to join my community of supporters by going to joyfulvegan.com/donate or just going right to patreon.com/Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. You can find the links at the show notes for this episode. You can find them on the website, joyfulvegan.com. You can choose the level that's right for you, and everything you contribute goes toward enabling this podcast to continue. Thanks, everyone. I'm really excited to share with you the last episode of 2024. And yes, this means that we have now completed 18 years of this podcast. A couple things I want to tell you about before we get into the meat. Yes, the plant-based meat of this episode. And that is 3 trips to tell you about, making sure you know about the 2025 trips that are coming up. Croatia is number 1. It's an exclusive luxury voyage through the breathtaking Adriatic Sea aboard our own private yacht in Croatia. We're going to go from Dubrovnik to Split, and I hope you join me at joyfulvegantrips.com. You can find the booking link and all the information. And by the way, I'm going backwards in 2025. So that is the last trip that I'm going to be doing in 2025. That's in September, October. And then you can also join me in June from Paris to Bordeaux. We start in Paris and we end in Bordeaux, but the bulk of our trip is in the most incredible, breathtaking valley called the Dordogne Valley, a region filled with green forests and castles and prehistoric caves and cuisine that is typically loaded with animal products, but not with us. So if you go to joyfulvegantrips.com, you can also find the booking link. And just a reminder, we also visit a sanctuary for rescued elephants. This is the first European sanctuary for rescued elephants. And then finally, there is a trip to Thailand I want to tell you about. I will not be on the trip, but those of you who've been with me know that World Vegan Travel, they are my partners in the trips that I do. They run the trip. They create the entire trip. In fact, the Thailand trip is really the beginning of how it started. Back in 2017 is when we had our first trip, and that was to Thailand, and that was run by World Vegan Travel, and that was really the beginning of this beautiful friendship. So if you are interested in going with World Vegan Travel on their 5-star trip to Thailand, I can tell you that I already know of 10 people who are from previous trips that have been on previous trips with me on Joyful Vegan trips. And I can tell you that all 10 of these people are incredible, and they will already be there. And the trip is in February, so you don't have a lot of time. However, if you are interested in joining, I encourage you to use the coupon code JOYFULVEGAN when booking your spot, and you will receive a 60-minute one-on-one session with me, and you will also receive a signed copy of The Joy of Vegan Baking or the 30-Day Vegan Challenge or the Joyful Vegan, whatever book you want. I was going to say whatever trip you want. The trip isn't free, but whatever book you want, along with a 1-hour session with me. We will arrange that at your leisure, but use Joyful Vegan as the coupon code when booking your spot to incentivize you to join World Vegan Travel for Thailand. It is a 5-star trip. It is absolutely incredible. You do go to elephant sanctuaries there for sure in the wild, because this is where elephants are used for logging. They're used for riding. You also go to many other places, 5-star hotels. It's just an incredible trip. You can find all the information in the booking link. And again, don't forget to use Joyful Vegan over at joyfulvegantrips.com. Now, today we're going to be talking all about celebrating good news, stories from 2024 that demonstrate that when good people act on behalf of animals and nature, and there are a lot of good people doing so, good things happen. And I am here to spread the good news. And before I get into these stories, I want to remind you that my newest book, my 8th book, A Year of Compassion, is coming out in March of 2025. It's just around the corner, and it is all about the good actions we can take in order to create good news. And I know a lot of people feel despondent. A lot of people feel disempowered, and I am here to tell you that that is a choice. You can just as easily feel empowered and hopeful. It's a matter of what you're paying attention to, and it's a matter of what you're willing to do to be part of that good news. So head over to joyfulvegan.com. I implore you to pre-order a copy of A Year of Compassion, 52 weeks of living plant-based, zero waste, and cruelty-free. And if you do register your purchase, your pre-order, I am also providing thank you gifts to those who win the drawing. So joyfulvegan.com is where you can find all of this. And thank you so much, because if all you read or watched was news from mainstream media or even the social media accounts, even of animal activists, you would think the world is about to end for animals, for us, and that there's no reason for hope. The media, including print media, TV media, social media, thrives on sensationalism and focuses on a sense of doom and gloom by design. And I don't mean that to be cynical. It is the case whether we're talking about crime or economy or politics. And it's also the case whether we're talking about the state of the world for animals and nature by design. That's not a cynical perspective. And we are partly the cause of this, because as much as we say we want positive stories and we don't want to hear about how horrible things are all the time, we are the ones who are clicking on the headlines that are negative. And there are studies that have been done as to why negativity drives online news consumption. And there are theories. Some of it has to do with a negative bias, like literally having a bias toward things that are already negative, and so you're seeking that out unconsciously. Also, we get a hit. We get an adrenaline hit when we read something negative in the news. It increases our physiological activations, and negative news is more likely to be remembered. And that's not surprising. There is a phrase in newsrooms that says, if it bleeds, it leads. And that was coined to reflect the intuition among journalists that stories about crime, stories about bloodshed, stories about tragedy sell more papers, digital stories, newspapers, than stories about good news. Today, it's the same with our clicks. So at one time it was physical newspapers, but it is our clicks that tell the publications what stories we want to read. And every time we click on a gloom and doom story, or doom and gloom and doom, either one, we are feeding the bad news beast. And so I'm not here to unpack why. There's a lot of reasons why. I mentioned kind of, negative bias and this belief that we want to get confirmation that everything is horrible all the time. Steven Pinker has a line that says, progressives seem to not believe in progress, right? I mean, we want to believe that by doing good work, by acting from our highest place, that there's going to be a good outcome. And yet, if you ask your average activist, your average progressive, your average person, they will say, no, we're going to hell in a handbasket and everything's awful. And so I'm here to tell you that that is not my bias and that the world is not ending. That's not to say that there isn't injustice, that there aren't wars, that there isn't violence against human and non-human animals and nature. It's not to say that that's not true, but we also have to know how and when things are going well so that we can learn from them and implement useful strategies to ensure success when things are going wrong. We also have to understand the mental toll it takes on us to just constantly consume negative news. There was a term coined in 2020 called doom scrolling, and that describes the habit of compulsively consuming distressing news. And of course, we all know what that means when we hear that. And today I can tell you that research spanning several decades has consistently cautioned against the potential detrimental effects of excessive exposure to negative news. Numerous studies have identified the connection between poor mental health and increased news consumption, particularly negative news. And the findings indicate that individuals who consume more news during and after, especially kind of more traumatic events, natural disasters, but really any news headline we're reading, are at higher risk of experiencing depression and stress and anxiety. And who among us would like to have a little less depression, a little less stress, a little less anxiety? So on that note, I want to also invite you to my March 2024 workshop. It's called Cultivating Hope, Empowering Change, Inspiring Action, and Building a Compassionate Future. And it is inspired by my book, The Joyful Vegan, as well as my book, A Year of Compassion. We'll be spending 3 hours together. It's all online, and we're going to be focusing on fostering empathy and promoting justice and inspiring positive change so that we can create a ripple effect that leads to a more just and kind world. And perhaps next year, I will be reading some stories that you inspired to indicate that things can be changed and things are going well. Not everything, not all the time, but there's a lot going well. And I always say that if we didn't believe that, none of us would get up in the morning. If we just thought that every effort we made had no bearing on the world, had no positive effect, then why would we even try? So if you want bad news, just turn off this podcast right now. Just turn it off. Just go read any publication you want, and just go get fed in that way. But that is not what this episode is about. I am here to feed you good news that are stories based on science and data and facts. And there are so many reasons to celebrate. So last year when I did this episode, and there's also a blog post to go along with it, I gave you 10 stories. This year, I thought you could use a few more. I'm giving you 20. And these are just a few. These are just 20 out of the dozens and dozens of stories out there to help you feel hopeful and to confirm for you that when we do put good effort out in the world, it actually has an impact. So get a cup of tea, pause, be prepared to feel hopeful, and enjoy. All of this is also, well, a shortened version of it is over at joyfulvegan.com. The show notes for this episode you can find over there, as well as this particular audio link. So number one, you've probably heard about this, but Denmark has finalized plans to implement the world's first tax on agricultural emissions, including methane from livestock. So starting in 2030, farmers will pay 300 kroner, which is about $43 per ton of methane, which is a lot. It's a pretty good sized tax, rising to 750 kroner by 2035. So it will start at 300 kroner and then move to 750. So methane, you would know, is significantly more potent than carbon dioxide, and it's a major contributor to global warming. It's a major contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, and with livestock emissions comparable to the output of 850 coal plants globally, this is very good news because it is an incentive to produce fewer livestock emissions by raising less cattle. Raising fewer cattle. So this agreement was reached after months of discussions with political parties, with farmers, with environmental groups, and it's part of Denmark's push to meet climate goals. And what I love about this is, if you heard that, there are 3 sectors who are coming together, who can be very, very different sectors on the face of it. Political parties, farmers, ranchers, and environmental groups. And so this initiative has also included, aside from just taxing livestock emissions, it's also meant to reduce nitrogen pollution, restore natural habitats, and enhance biodiversity. If you were to ask me where I feel most worried, I'll be really honest with you. It's not global warming in the sense that it's not all connected. Of course it is. But honestly, if you were to ask me where I'm most worried, but also see hope, It is in the depletion of natural habitats, a depletion of wild space. That's where I feel most worried. But I am also very hopeful. And so one of the initiatives as part of this bigger plan is to plant, wait for it, 618,000 acres of new forest and restoring 345,000 acres of cultivated peatlands to their natural state, which would allow them to resume their role as carbon storage systems. A lot of carbon is stored in peatlands. So exciting. It's ambitious, but it is so encouraging. And of course, these are the kinds of models that inspire other countries to take the next step as well. But you need someone to start it. And Denmark is proving that they're a leader in sustainability and environmental restoration. So I'm incredibly encouraged by that. This story would have come out a year or so ago, but the thing that makes it part of 2024's story is that they actually figured out how they're going to do it. And so that is going to start happening. And it's very, very exciting. Number 2, Colombia bans bullfighting. So Colombia has made history with President Gustavo Petro's signing of legislation to ban bullfighting by 2027. This marks a significant cultural shift in a country where bullfighting has long been considered tradition. Now, in addition to Colombia, we have other countries that have prohibited bullfighting. We have Argentina, Canada, Cuba, Denmark, Italy, Nicaragua, Panama, Uruguay, and the United Kingdom. And within nations where bullfighting remains legal, certain regions or cities have enacted local bans. You've probably read about Mexico. There's a state of Quintana Roo, Sonora, Guerrero, all of whom have outlawed bullfighting. And Mexico City imposed an indefinite ban in 2022. So we'll see if that holds up. And this decision reflects growing ethical awareness about animal welfare concerns. Like, this is directly because of animal welfare concerns. And there's an increasing public awareness, global movement to phase out cruel practices. I know it's so easy to look at all of the cruelty that continues to happen, but if you compare, especially entertainment, with what it was like just 100 years ago, I think you will be very encouraged by that. So you can certainly go read your animal welfare history and go prove to yourself that things are better today than they were 100 years ago. And we have a lot of work to do. But this is a really hopeful sign. Thank you to all the advocates and the leaders who have set this precedent for other places where bullfighting persists. So that is number 2. Colombia banning bullfighting. Number 3, so encouraged, so exciting. Renewable energy surpasses 30% of global electricity. So renewable energy refers to wind, solar, hydropower, and bioenergy. And now those sectors of renewable energy account for over 30% of global electricity generation. And this is incredibly exciting. Obviously, it reflects advancements in technology, and mostly, I would say, because the technology has been there for a long time, I would say what is significantly different than in the past is the cost reductions. There's been a 99% drop in solar panel prices over the last generation. That's incredibly exciting. And it's only going to stay that way and continue to get better. The International Energy Agency predicts renewables will power nearly 50% of the world's electricity by 2030, with solar expected to surpass hydropower as the leading renewable source. So it's happening faster than anyone predicted. And frankly, it's very possible that it's going to happen even faster. And so jumping off of that one, I want to separate out number 4, which is wind and solar surpasses coal in the United States. So this is also incredibly encouraging. Rapid progress in the alternative energy sector, specifically in the United States. So for the first time in history, wind and solar power have outpaced coal in the United States electricity mix. And this milestone highlights the nation's shift toward cleaner energy. And I will tell you that I know it's really tempting to say that the left cares about renewable energies and the right doesn't. I'm just making a generalization. I'm not saying I believe that, so you can hold off your letters to me. But there is, I think, a general attitude that it's the left who are more progressive who are leading the charge. Yes, and states like Texas are at the forefront. They have Texas has broken solar energy records in 2024. So again, it's not this dichotomous story that I think a lot of us want to tell. So this is incredibly encouraging. This is reducing greenhouse gas emissions. It's enhancing energy independence. It's showcasing the feasibility of a sustainable energy future. And of course, a lot of that has been pushed forward from the infrastructure plan that was passed under the Biden administration. And it's really hard to stop progress that is happening where jobs are being created. So I know a lot of you are worried about what the future looks like over the next few years in the United States, but I will say it's really hard to roll back progress when people are actually working in those sectors. So we'll see. We'll see. But that is a story for 2024. And I can't wait to tell you the story in 2025. We'll see. Okay, number 5. The Ocean Cleanup. The Ocean Cleanup is an organization, and I would really say like this enterprise that has removed over 15,000 tons of trash from oceans and rivers worldwide since 2013. It's incredibly amazing. And again, this really has to do with technology. There's a really cool technology they have. It's called the System 002, nicknamed Jenny. And it's designed to capture plastic in concentrated areas like the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, which many of you have heard. So they have this interceptor system in rivers. And one of the reasons the interceptor system is so important is because it prevents trash from reaching the open waters in the first place. And so when I talk about this in A Year of Compassion, whenever we're talking about plastics and the ocean, where are we most effective? Is it more effective, stop using plastic straws? Or is it more effective, question mark, question mark. So I talk about this in the book. And I will say one of the things that is the most effective thing in terms of stopping the kind of accumulation of garbage, like in the Great Pacific Garbage Patch, is to stop it from reaching the ocean in the first place. And so what does that mean? Yep, there are organizations like the Ocean Cleanup you can support and you can watch their progress. You can go to their website and you can actually see what their progress is. But I would also say that beach cleanups is so, so, so important because you literally stop all the things that have been sitting on the beach that could easily, with the next tide, go into the ocean. And so that doesn't mean we don't stop using plastic. Of course, we should stop using plastic. And I talk about, well, I shouldn't say stop using plastic, but stop creating plastic waste. So there's a difference between plastic use and plastic waste. And I will say, and I do say this in the book, that the majority of plastic in the ocean is from fishing. It's from the fishing industry. So a lot to say there, a lot to unpack, but there being now all this trash in the ocean, organizations like the Ocean Cleanup, they have collected just hundreds of thousands of kilograms worth of trash, 15,000 tons since just 2013. So really exciting. And you can see the progress. You can see the difference. It's happening. It's right there. So go check out the Ocean Cleanup. Go check out their website and you can see all the great work they're doing. Number 6, I love these stories of species that have been considered in the endangered species list or the critically endangered species list, who because of conservation efforts by incredible conservation groups and individuals, we see a shift. And there is a shift in the animal that's been called the unicorn of whales. It's the narwhal, because they have this really interesting unicorn-like horn on their head, on the top of their head. They've been called the unicorn of the sea, and they have been declared no longer at risk thanks to stable population levels. Despite ongoing challenges, this unique Arctic whale has shown resilience against threats such as climate change and human activity. And this is because of conservation efforts and careful monitoring. They've played a huge role in ensuring the survival of these iconic creatures, providing hope, not just for the future, but for the present, providing hope for these animals and for marine biodiversity in general. So I think if you're listening closely, you will be identifying the fact that there's different efforts that are contributing to these success stories. Some of it's technology, some of it's legislation, some of it is conservation and monitoring. And we need all of these things. And some of it is individual actions as well. So do not underestimate any one of these areas. We need it all. We need all of it. Another one that is number 7 that is related to legislation, and this is actually larger than any one country, is the European Parliament has made a groundbreaking move to tackle the issue of packaging waste by approving the packaging and packaging waste regulation. And this is ambitious legislation that sets binding targets to reduce packaging waste and imposes strict limits on single-use plastics, signaling a major step toward a sustainable future for Europe. So when it happens at this kind of like European Parliament level, it obviously supersedes any individual country in the EU. So I'm encouraged by that. It aims to curb the environmental harm caused by disposable packaging, and it promotes sustainable practices across industry. So this is, again, an incentive for industry to get innovative and to cut waste pollution and to encourage the development of eco-friendly alternatives, because it's only as limiting as our imagination. But we have a vast imagination. We are incredibly resourceful and we're incredibly innovative. And legislation like this really encourages industry companies to make changes and to innovate their packaging design and their material use. So it's exciting. So it has been passed. It hasn't been implemented, but we're going to see what happens in terms of a collective action, right, in achieving these sustainability goals. So we'll see, but I'm really encouraged by that kind of legislation. Number 8, one of my favorite stories from 2024 is a hog farm that has transitioned to a mushroom farm. So maybe you've heard about this. There is a family in rural Iowa, and they have transitioned their hog operation, into a sustainable mushroom farm, guided by their son, who, again, it takes one person to go, let's take a look at this and see what we can do. And they, like so many animal farmers and ranchers, struggled to make any profit from animal husbandry and animal agriculture. It is really, really, really difficult, even with government subsidies. And so it's exhausting and it's expensive and, not to mention, cruel, but that's not what the incentive was for this family. And so their profits, despite their hard work, had diminished to $15,000 a year by 2020. And so, with the help of Mercy for Animals Transformation Project, that's what it's called, which helps farmers move away from industrial animal agriculture toward plant-based alternatives, they started looking into this and have made substantial steps. So the Faubourgs is the name of the family, Faaborg. They began growing specialty mushrooms such as reishi, lion's mane, oyster mushrooms for both medicinal and culinary use. And so they took one of their hog barns and they converted it for mushroom cultivation. And they're now restoring the land to native forest with native trees, pollinator-friendly fields, and a freshwater pond that is replacing the former waste lagoon. Pretty exciting. So Tanner, the son who inspired this, and his brother Tyler launched what they're calling 1100 Farm, which is named after the number of pigs, each barn once held. And now in those barns, they sell mushroom-based products like tinctures and coffee and salt and more. It's incredibly exciting. It was a financial gamble for them to do this. It required $1 million in investments, but they have already seen that it's worth the effort to create a sustainable and profitable and environmentally friendly farm, not to mention cruelty free, not using pigs, but actually growing mushrooms. You can find this story. I read about it first in the New York Times. You can find it in many news outlets, so just go research it yourself. I actually have links on the show notes at joyfulvegan.com if you want to go check it out. Very exciting. That was number 8. Number 9 is a really fun story in Brussels that has become a pioneer in modernizing traditional city tours that once used horse-drawn carriages, and they've replaced those horse-drawn carriages with electric carriages. And they look really cool. They're kind of designed to mimic early electric vehicle designs. Like they just look really cool. And apparently the operator made the change after growing tired of accusations of animal cruelty. So it wasn't that he saw animal cruelty or felt that he was being cruel, but he was tired of the pressure. And so he changed. So read that any way you like, because I know that some people want to say, well, he didn't do it for the animals. Well, no, he didn't, but it's the animals who are going to benefit from it. And the other thing I would read into it is that the pressure, just keeping that pressure up, it's true. Just facilitators of these kinds of, endeavors and enterprises, they just don't want to keep being told they're doing something wrong. And if they can, again, use that innovation and resourcefulness and creativity, they can do what this gentleman did, which is create the first of its kind of these daily tours with these vehicles. And Brussels is the first European capital to do this. And that was as of June 2024, so pretty recent. And so we're also seeing other cities restrict horse-drawn carriages due to concerns about animal welfare. Some of that's coming out of legislation, but what I'm talking about is someone using innovation to stop using horse-drawn carriages and creating a business around it that is better for the animals, better for the animals, period. But also, it's a business that's viable, and if it's viable and it works and it's profitable, people are gonna keep doing it, even if their inspiration isn't for animal welfare. So we have cities in, around the world. We have Barcelona, Montreal, Prague that have banned or restricted horse-drawn carriages. In the US, we have Chicago, Salt Lake City. New York has resisted, but I know there's a lot of pressure still in New York to do so. So we'll see. And again, if you go to joyfulvegan.com and you go to this episode's page, you can see a photo of it because it's really cute. It's really fun. Okay, before we go on to the next one, I want to tell you also about a special. A lot of you know that I talk a lot about the need to complement and not supplement. Complement is my favorite supplement company, for lack of a better word. But what I love about them is they have formulations that are specific to people who are eating plant-based, who don't need all of the nutrients that we can and should get from food, but they have a formulation that is basically, kind of the things that we typically want to make sure we're getting, like vitamin D, like selenium, like vitamin B12. And so that's their essentials capsules. And I've talked about essentials in episodes I've done recently, specifically around blood work. And then I also talked about the need to make sure and test for your omega-3 fatty acids, your omegas. And I tell the story in a podcast episode you can go listen to about how I tested, and I was just on the edge of being kind of not at the number I wanted to be at for omegas. And my husband was definitely deficient. And we made some changes, all using Complement's omega complex. And our numbers have shot up, and it's incredibly exciting. If that's how you get your excitement, that's how I get my excitement. And so I just really stand by Complement, and you have always been able to use my link. And if this special is over by the time you hear this, please still go to joyfulvegan.com. And at the homepage especially, you will see the discount code, which is I believe Joyful Vegan, and you can get 15% off using that discount code, but you have to use the link that's over there. You will find that year round. However, they are offering a special to listeners, which is 30% off of these bundles. So you basically use the link also over at joyfulvegan.com on the homepage, and you will be brought to a page where you will see all of their different products, and you choose 3 and you get 30% off. So it's only available for a few days. It starts today as I am putting this out. By the time you hear this, it will be live, but it ends January 6th. 2025. So this is only going to be good for a short time. If you hear this after January 6th, you can absolutely still use the link or use one of the links on my website, because I'll change the link to back to the regular link, and you get 15% off using Joyful Vegan as the discount code. But between now and January 6th, go over to joyfulvegan.com. You don't even need a special discount code. You just go over to joyfulvegan.com, click on the link that's over there on the homepage, and you will get 30% off of 3 products in the bundle special for their New Year, New You special. So go check that out at joyfulvegan.com. Moving on to good news number 10, and that is South Korea is becoming a global leader in food waste recycling. This is pretty stark contrast to 20 years ago in South Korea. 98% of food waste ended up in landfills, and today it has reversed that. So it is now recycling. And when I say recycle, I don't mean like, recycling a bottle, but literally taking the food waste and using it, valuing it. This is what I talk about in A Year of Compassion. Zero waste is not just about never having a food scrap again, never having waste, but it's actually converting it into use and to a valuable resource. And so South Korea has now taken their food waste and recycling 98% of it, when 20 years ago, 98% of food waste ended up in landfills. So today, leftovers from homes and restaurants are being transformed into compost, into energy, and it's showcasing an efficient and sustainable and, again, profitable system. So this country is one of the few to implement a nationwide food waste management system. Obviously, South Korea can do this more easily than a country like the United States or Canada, which are huge, but they're basically implementing a nationwide food waste management system, embedding recycling into the daily lives of its 50 million citizens. So still not a small number of people. 50 million people is a lot of people, and it's highlighting the critical role of collective action and, again, infrastructure change and legislation. So we need to address food waste. We talked about methane before. Methane is the most prevalent greenhouse gas in landfills because people think, oh, it's a banana. I can throw my banana in the garbage because it's going to compost. No, it's not going to compost. If you don't have the conditions for compost, you are not going to have compost. You are basically going to have a system where that banana peel, whatever you throw out, whatever food item you throw out, it is not actually composting and breaking down. It's actually just emitting gases and greenhouse gases, and methane is one of them. So food waste contributes to about 6% of global greenhouse gas emissions, roughly 1/4 of food-related emissions. So you will read about this in A Year of Compassion if you go, please pre-order it. And I talk all about ways to reduce your food waste. But yay, South Korea, that is setting a powerful example of how innovative policies, widespread participation can turn a major environmental challenge into a sustainable solution. So that's number 10. Number 11, I love this story so much. It's so significant. Britain has ended coal power. This marks the end of an era. Britain has become the first G7 nation to completely eliminate coal-fired power with the closure of its final coal plant in Nottinghamshire. This ends 140 years of reliance on coal power, and it represents a major milestone in the UK's commitment to decarbonization and to tackling climate change. I think it's so exciting because, well, I mean, so exciting because because coal is just such an incredibly just dirty energy source. But when you think about Britain, and I think about Britain a lot, I have been an Anglophile most of my life, but I have read a lot of history of the UK and a lot of literature. And when you think about how deeply coal has been intertwined with the country's culture, economy, identity for centuries, it's incredible. I mean, the UK was the birthplace of the Industrial Revolution. Coal was the backbone of Britain's industrial growth from the 18th century, 19th century, right? The country's mines fueled factories, railways, ships, and it propelled Britain to global economic dominance. It did do that. But closing the chapter on coal signifies a dramatic shift from this industrial legacy to a cleaner, greener future. How cool is that? I'm so encouraged and excited about that. And that also happened faster than anyone expected. And no one expected it to happen this quickly. And so they have a commitment, UK has a commitment to a net zero carbon target by 2050. And this achievement puts it at the forefront of efforts to phase out fossil fuels globally. So with renewable energy sources like wind and solar now powering over 40% of the UK's electricity, Britain's energy landscape has been transformed. How cool is that? Bye-bye, coal. Goodbye. Goodbye. So exciting. So exciting. Okay. Number 12, in a landmark ruling, Ecuador has become the first country in the world to grant legal rights to individual wild animals. Now, back in 2008, I remember when I first heard about this, back in 2008, that country, Ecuador, became the first in the world to recognize nature as a right-bearing entity. Now, that law was enshrined in the Constitution, but it's unclear whether wild animals have actually benefited from it. But it is going to be interesting to see how it could be implemented. And so we'll see. But it is the first country to grant legal rights to individual wild animals, building on that groundbreaking 2008 Constitution Amendment that recognized nature. So as an entity with rights. So we'll see how this can transform how wild animals are treated and protected, giving them specific legal standing. But it definitely does mean that it is a step toward recognizing that animals are not just resources to be managed, but they are recognized as individuals with rights. And it could strengthen conservation efforts. It could ensure better protection against exploitation. It could set a precedent for other nations to follow. So we'll see, but I think at least it paves the way for a deeper conversation about the rights of nature and certainly the rights of individual living beings, challenging what I think is the real struggle, the real challenge for other animals, and that is this very human-centric perspective, perception, and certainly legal framework. So this new perspective could inspire certainly conversation and certainly other countries to adopt similar measures. So we will see how this can help promote coexistence and respect for all life forms and how it could actually mean a very practical implementation from a legal perspective. So that's number 12. Number 13, Australia has expanded its marine parks, protecting more ocean than any other country in the world. Australia has taken a bold step in ocean conservation. It has expanded what's called the Heard Island and McDonald Islands Marine Reserve by over 300,000 square kilometers, which is huge. So this move ensures that 52% of Australia's oceans are now protected, more than any other country. So the Heard and McDonald Islands are located in a remote sub-Antarctic region, and they're home to pristine ecosystems, glaciers, active volcanoes, and with the reserve now quadrupled in size, that's what this new endeavor has accomplished, the area gains new habitat protection zones, new national park regions, and it builds on Australia's recent conservation efforts, including the expansion of another marine park called the Macquarie Island Marine Park. So, very exciting. It has also come from an alliance of different organizations, the government, politicians, political groups, conservationists, and it's incredibly encouraging. The challenge of funding biodiversity conservation is, I think, we can't underestimate it. The advocates who emphasize the need to increase biodiversity, it has to come from governments who are willing to invest. So we can talk all we want about, how we need to increase biodiversity and habitat, but if a government is not going to fund it, it's not going to happen. And so Australia has kind of put their money where their mouth is when it comes to protecting land and water in that country. And so we'll see what happens. We need more. Australia needs more. The funding levels are far below what's needed, especially to continue to protect it. But it's an incredible first step, and we'll see what happens. But that goes on my good news list as number 13. Number 14, Zambia. You can see I'm really bringing in all the different places around the world. I didn't want to just be Eurocentric or North America centric. There's good news happening everywhere. So in Zambia, there is a national park called Kafue National Park, and it's a conservation organization specializing in wildcats that has reported that the number of leopards in this park, in Kafue National Park, has tripled. So now there are 4.4 leopards per 38 square miles of terrain. And that is much more than it sounds like when you consider that Kafue is 22,000 square miles. So it's huge, but the concentration of leopards is now increasing. And again, that comes from conservation, that comes from a commitment on the behalf of the government to protect it. And I love stories like this. And I know this is like an open space area, and we do have open spaces in the United States and elsewhere, but we can all support an increase in animals in our own cities, in our own towns, in our own villages. There's so much we can do locally. I've talked a lot about the need to increase biodiversity and habitat in our own backyards. And a lot of that comes from just lifting the things that are the greatest hindrance to wildlife, and that is fences. And it also means increasing wildlife crossings, and I'm seeing more of that. There's a new crossing that was just approved in North Carolina. It's not on my 2024 list because I already wrote this list by the time that story came out. But I'm telling you that more and more towns and areas and regions and states are actually looking at creating wildlife crossings. It costs millions of dollars to do so. I think it was last year or the year before when LA broke ground, California broke ground in the Los Angeles area to build what will be the largest wildlife crossing in at least the country, if not at least the country. So these are the kinds of stories I'm really encouraged by, and you can really be involved in that by just starting to go talk to your local representation. So please do not over focus on national politics. Please, 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 I encourage you to get involved locally because there's a lot you can do, and they need to hear from you. You need to go to your local representatives and find out what they're doing for wildlife, what they're doing for habitat, and then just talk to them about what would this look like? What could it look like? Give them some stories, give them some examples. Go find stories of, where there's zoning changes, where fences need to be raised so that at least smaller animals can get through and that, or lowered so that deer can jump over them. Go get stories of wildlife crossings being successful and go reach out to your local representatives. Okay, that was maybe 14A because I didn't expect to talk about that, or 14B. But the story of increased leopards in Zambia, great story, number 14. Number 14A. Number 14B is the North Carolina Wildlife Crossing. So I'm including it, I guess, after all. Number 15, in Helsinki, Finland. They are set to revolutionize sustainable energy with the construction of the world's largest air-to-water heat pump, capable of heating 30,000 homes. Now, I also talk about heat pumps in A Year of Compassion. I talk about kind of the top 10 things you can do in your home to reduce your reliance on fossil fuels. And if you have the opportunity, and I do talk about the fact that, look, you're not going to be able to do it, just by reading the book, but maybe by the time you are renovating or you've saved some money or this is a commitment that you're looking to make and you can still take advantage of some of the tax credits, the federal tax credits, I would really encourage you to go look at converting to a heat pump, especially if you're in an area where you use the furnace for heat during, the cold months. So Finland is creating the world's largest heat pump capable of heating 30,000 homes. So it will drastically lower carbon emissions by replacing fossil fuels in Helsinki's district heating system, which distributes heat to buildings through an underground pipe network. So it is incredibly exciting and an example of, once again, a government entity implementing with the private sector climate-friendly tools. And you can do the same thing in your own home. You can do the same thing in your home. You don't have to wait for your city or for your government, your federal government to do so. You can get a heat pump yourself, and you will also save big time. Number 16, London Fashion Week is set to become the first Big Four fashion weeks to ban the use of exotic animal skins starting in 2025. So this move will prohibit materials like crocodile, alligator, snake skin from appearing on its runways, building on London's commitment to ethical fashion because they already banned fur in 2023. I know, I hear you, I can hear you right now. I know it's not all animal leather. Of course, it should be all skins. There should be no difference between using skins of quote unquote exotic animals and using the skins of domesticated animals. But it is a good move. It is a really good move, and I'm encouraged by it. It's been praised by animal welfare advocates. It's a critical step toward humane practices in high fashion. And this kind of stuff inspires, this leadership that we need inspires other fashion capitals like Milan and Paris to do the same thing because fur and exotic skins are prevalent still in Milan and Paris. But this is an indication to you where to spend your time. London leadership heard, go focus on Milan, go focus on Paris, or work with organizations who are doing so. So we're seeing this. I do talk about this also in A Year of Compassion about sustainable fashion and the materials that are the most sustainable that we can implement individually as well, because we're seeing so much innovation and just wonderful alternatives in plant-based leather, lab-grown materials, recycled textiles. So really, really exciting things happening. And if you consider how prevalent feathers were. I mean, literally birds went extinct because feathers were such a big part of women's fashion back in the 20th century. This wasn't that long ago. So please, I hope you gain some hope from this particular shift. I think it's really good news. Number 17, New Zealand bans greyhound racing. New Zealand, the entire country, banned greyhound racing. It's going to be banned by 2026, so that's just around the corner. And they did it because they're citing high rates of injuries and deaths among racing dogs. That is a welfare issue. And so it has faced this industry increasing scrutiny worldwide. So I'm seeing more and more bans and closures in several countries and regions due to concerns over animal welfare. Mexico closed its last greyhound racing track in Tijuana in 2024. So another good news for 2024. The United States has seen a dramatic decline in greyhound racing. Commercial operations are now illegal in 43 states. So only 2 tracks remain active in West Virginia. And then we have states like Florida, Iowa, Arkansas, Texas shutting down their tracks in recent years. I remember when Florida's passed. So exciting. In other parts of the world, the future of greyhound racing varies. It remains legal in the United Kingdom. So go ahead, go find organizations working on that. But there is growing pressure to phase out the practice because of ethical concerns. Australia, where greyhound racing is still allowed, has also experienced public outcry and calls for reform, but bans have yet to be enacted. So go work in your backyard. If you're in Australia, go find organizations who are working to ban greyhound racing. And every time we have another country or another city do something like this, it sets another precedent. It sets another precedent. And that's what we need. That's what we need. So that is number 17. Number 18, the UK bans live animal exports. The UK has banned live animal exports for slaughter, which addresses a major concern about the stress and suffering animals endure in transport. It is another, look, I have some podcast episodes about this. Books have been written about this. Britain has been a leader in animal welfare laws. It's not perfect. There's a lot to do, but this is just another example of Britain's leadership in improving animal agriculture welfare, setting a global standard. What we want is, of course, I would love slaughter to go away completely. And I think I have hopes about that, but that's for another time. But this is just another example of Britain's leadership in animal welfare. So that is number 18. Number 19, the retirement of research chimpanzees. The National Institutes of Health has begun the very long-awaited process of relocating retired chimpanzees who were used for research purposes to Chimp Haven, a sprawling 200-acre sanctuary in Louisiana. This has been a long, long effort, and it marks a significant step in fulfilling this commitment to ensure that these animals who have endured so much being used for research, they can live out their remaining years in peace and comfort. It is so incredibly inspiring, and I'm so grateful to all of the activists who worked on this. And to Chimp Haven, you can go to their website, you can keep following the story, you can see videos of the animals. It's just so exciting. You can see the space, the large outdoor spaces, the social groups that they form. I mean, they already formed. There's already chimps who have been rescued, obviously, and brought to sanctuary at Chimp Haven. And this will give them opportunities to live out their lives in peace and have enrichment and have relationships and, of course, rehabilitate, because that's going to take some time as well. And finally, number 20, if you followed the story at all, you know that Paul Watson, the well-known anti-whaling activist, founder of Sea Shepherd, he was arrested in July of 2024 in Greenland, which is an autonomous territory of Denmark. And he was arrested based on a 2012 warrant for his arrest it was Japan's warrant. And so these charges stemmed from an incident in 2010 when Watson was accused of interfering with Japan and the Japanese whaling ship and allegedly injuring a crew member, because Japan, as you probably know, is the world's leading whaling. It's one of the world's leading whaling nations. And so his arrest attracted major public support, with a petition attracting over 200,000 signatures. And so he was released from custody just in December after being detained for 5 months on this international arrest warrant. And it's because Danish authorities rejected Japan's request for his extradition. Japan and Denmark do not have an agreement or an extradition agreement. So the Danish authorities said, nope, not going to happen. And so he was released, which is very, very good news. The organization Sea Shepherd is known for its direct action campaigns to disrupt practices like whaling and shark finning. And what was so beautiful, I just loved his Paul Watson's response to it, because he emphasized that obviously his arrest brought attention to Japan's ongoing whaling operations. And he told the press upon being released that the 5 months that he was in prison, they were an extension of the campaign. He's obviously just, one of the heroes in marine conservation. And it's very good news that he has been released. So that came right before Christmas to jubilation and relief. So there are my 20 stories. If I counted correctly, that's 20 stories. And if you would like more good news and you want to implement these good news stories and you want to be part of these good news stories, join me in March of 2024 for my conference, my online conference on cultivating hope and cultivating compassion and creating these kinds of stories, in creating the kind of justice-oriented stories and change that we need in this world. And it's because of people like you, and it's because of organizations, conservationists, government officials, innovative people, resources in technology, just because of all of these, raising awareness, putting pressure on industry, legislative changes. I mean, there's just so many reasons why we have all of these good news stories, and I only chose 20. There are more. So go over to joyfulvegan.com. You can find the story on the website. So, just type in good news 2024 and you will find the story. You will find links to the bigger stories. You'll find photos there. So you can see some of the fun photos of, for instance, like the Brussels vehicle that has replaced horse-drawn carriages. And if you please go over to the website, on the homepage, you will also see a link to pre-order A Year of Compassion. And you will also see the link to the New Year, New You sale designed to help you kickstart your health goal for the new year by investing in your wellness, by getting 30% off the bundles at Complement. Remember, technically it ends January 7th, but you'll have through January 6th to do so. So go over, click on the link, pick 3 products, and get 30% off. I am so grateful to you. I did not really give much of an appeal, but in the beginning I said, if you would like to enable me to continue this work, please consider becoming a supporter. We have an incredible group of community members who are over with me on Patreon, and you are making this work possible. I am so grateful to all of you for your support. I'm so grateful to you for your compassion for the animals. This is Colleen Patrick-Goudreau. Thanks for listening, and Happy New Year.